We're live.
Okay. Well, we should begin everything with prayer. Heavenly King, Comforter of the Spirit of truth, Lord, who art present and fillest all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come abide in us and cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good one. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Well, thank you all for coming out. You know, this is going to be just exactly what it says here. This is a pilgrim, me, making some observations and providing some reflections on things about my journey. You know, I will say at the outset, this is not like by any means intended to be the sum content of what I did, nor even the most important things. I think the most important things I did when I was there were spiritual things. You know, they were things related to prayer, to the hopefully setting right of my own heart. Won't go any further really on that topic, but this is going to be more of a sort of like things I think I can say, having been to Cyprus. So let us begin then. First of all, I was there for just shy of 3 weeks, and you know, I realize this is not broken up so that it's easy to necessarily digest quickly, but my first stay in Cyprus was at the Makeras Monastery. We'll talk more about Makeras a little bit later. But Makeras is Our Lady of Makeras, or the version of Makeras, Panagia of Makeras, and it is this ancient icon that the monastery takes its name from. Again, we'll come back to that a little bit more later. On May 2nd, I visited occupied northern Cyprus, which, as we'll come back to again, has been occupied by the Turkish army since 1974. On the 3rd, I was there. That was a Sunday. I was at St. Heraclidius Monastery, which is a beautiful monastery, which, again, we'll come back to basically everything I'm touching on here. But it's dedicated to the first bishop of Cyprus. Right, not the first bishop of the whole island, but the first bishop who was consecrated in Cyprus, the sort of first leader there of any size other than the apostles. The next days, I visited. I was all around the country, visited the Stavrovouni Monastery and also the city of Paphos. On May 6th, I traveled to the tiny mountain village of Kalopaniotis, beautiful little village, home of a UNESCO World Heritage Monastery. There's a bunch of that in Cyprus, but this one has one as well. On the 7th to the 9th of May, I spent time in the gorgeous and internationally famous Yikos Monastery. And then, as my trip sort of wound down, I went to Larnaca, which again we'll touch on, but that's where St. Lazarus reposed the second time, right? And Ayia Napa, which is sort of the east coast of Cyprus, and then around in that area, back and forth a little bit, and then I left. To be honest, by the time that, you know, roughly May 10th had arrived, I wanted to see my children again. You know, and Zoom only goes so far. So I mean, you know, I really enjoyed my trip, but there's also a level of, okay, I want to get back to my family and this sort of thing. Okay, this is a simplified map of my travels because Google couldn't handle I exhausted the number of destinations, and so but you can see I was like basically all around the place. I didn't get to the kind of extreme northwest there, but I really was all around. So what did I learn? what did I learn? And this is what I'm going to be doing in this talk, just sort of going through observations and things that I learned. So first of all, Cyprus is very, very old in terms of human civilization. This is something that I knew before I went there, but it was kind of cool to have people sort of put numbers on it. Most contemporary archaeologists would date human activity on Cyprus to go back beyond 10,000 BC. It's really old, right? Older than Jericho. And just from that period, I have, but it's not that period, not like 10,000 BC, but this is like 500 BC kind of era. But I just took some pictures in a museum of some various things. Sort of Greek pagan mythology. You've got sort of the divine sun on this decorative dish. You've got Theseus slaying the Minotaur and all sorts of things like that. So other things of observation. Cyprus has been Christian for a very long time. Christianity in Cyprus dates to the 1st century, and in fact, deep into the 1st century. We'll talk a little... What's this sound? Oh, okay. Anyway, deep into the 1st century. We'll explore that a little bit later. But it is an early adopter of Christianity, and it's a place where Christianity flourishes very profoundly even at the beginning. Paganism basically ceased to exist there by the end of the 4th century, right? Cyprus was already had a lot of Christian momentum from the very beginning, but after the Edict of Toleration of St. Constantine, and the sort of understanding that the empire is going this way, paganism just, one of the articles I was looking at when I prepared this, paganism collapsed. It was teetering and so by the end of the 4th century, basically paganism is gone. I do want to bring your attention to this particular picture that I took here. This is from a church called Angeloctistis, which means built by the angels. There's kind of a beautiful story about the building of the church, which involves the workers sort of going to sleep at night and coming back, and a little bit more was finished every day. Like they would work real hard all day and build stuff. They'd come back in the morning and more was done. At some point or other, they're like, we got to figure out what's going on. So they have somebody like go out, some people go out in the middle of the night and watch, and they saw a vision of the angels actually, helping them build a church. So this church built by the angels, this is the apse behind the altar. Just to talk about the antiquity of this icon, right? You notice, wait, Greek speakers over here. What's it say up there on the top, if you can read it? There's a little cross, and then another cross, so it's 2 words. Yeah, you don't see that on modern icons of the Mother of God, do you? Holy Mary? Like, wow, this is an old icon. Like, before the Mater Theou tradition, the abbreviations is established. And for the Michaels present, that is the Archangel Michael, and that's the Archangel Gabriel. Actually, you can kind of tell by the, we'll say HG there. So he's got his initials there. I'm Holy Gabriel. So another thing, Cyprus is very close to Israel. And I think that it's appropriate to think about Cyprus in terms of being a Middle Eastern country, right? To put this in perspective, right? So we can see I made a comparison here. State College to New Jersey, basically New Jersey, 152 miles. Cyprus to, roughly. Tel Aviv. Yeah, not Tel Aviv though. Tel Aviv. Yeah. The mount with the prophets of Baal and Elijah and basically Mount Carmel. That's it. But basically to Mount Carmel, 148 miles. Now, in comparison, if you go to the other side and try to get it to Greece, like mainland Greece, you're well over 500 miles, right? So this is way closer to Israel than it is to Greece. and closer still to Lebanon or Syria or Turkey, right? Cyprus is both small and also remarkably tall. So you can drive almost anywhere in Cyprus in 2 hours or less. This is one of the things that sold me on visiting there, was the fact that, like, Greece, when I look at it, is like incredibly confusing looking. Like, it's like just like Swiss cheese, and there's like stuff that's like floated off into the ocean, and like how would you get to that place and this sort of thing. You know, Cyprus is very drivable. If you're anywhere near the center of the island, you can get most places in 2 hours. Okay, you want to get up to the Horn, like the panhandle of northern Cyprus, it's going to be longer. You want to get like way up the really windy mountain roads, it might be a little longer. But most of the places you can get to in 2 hours or less. So it's very small. It's also remarkably tall. And this just occurred to me when I was there. It's like, okay, how far above sea level am I? And then I'm like, okay, well, how far above sea level is Pennsylvania? Right? I did not look this up, but my guess is, given that height, right, that probably the highest point in Cyprus is higher than the highest point in Pennsylvania, which is kind of wild, right? But certainly it's very close to the highest point of America east of the Mississippi. So you do not need good flood insurance if you're up in the Troodos Mountains. You're fine.
Fire insurance.
What's that? Fire insurance? Yeah, right. Well said. Well said. So Cyprus is incredibly fertile. Not something I realized about it. Again, I'm going through observations here. Cyprus is incredibly fertile. You know, there are frequent droughts there, and you know, there's definitely some fear among scientists and locals and whatnot that the region is going to, you know, sort of collapse into being sort of a truly semi-arid climate, which would be actually horrific for the island. It would be very, very bad for them. But as it now stands, Cyprus is an incredibly fertile place. You know, everywhere you go, things are growing. Leonie, do the lemons grow year-round? Sorry, you're behind the column there.
I don't know.
Well, there were lemon. I mean, there were lots of lemons on the trees in April, May when I
would think from probably April through the fall, like September.
Yeah, but in any event, you know, so it's very, 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 very fertile. You know, again, I got to see all manner of things. You know, lots of people grow pomegranate trees, lots of people grow citrus, lots of people grow olives, and I would say that in general, sort of traditional Cypriots very much pride themselves on, you know, having sort of nice fruit trees, or, you know, nice. I mean, if I'm counting olives as a fruit, right? Like, but nice fruit trees, nice. You know, you can eat from the land itself. Just some pictures here of. I was struck in the time that I was there. The flowers came out more and more. And one thing that struck me, you know, a lot of the Cypriot landscape is somewhat like, you know, it's sort of a little bit dry. You can kind of see the dirt. I'm sure that, like, when you get to the high summer, it's very brown. Is that? I gotta get you beyond the pillar there. But I'm sure it's very brown because it gets very hot in the summer. Or it gets very hot in the summer. But just, you know, sort of like being around places. This is a pomegranate on its way. You can kind of see another one down there. It's starting to look just a little bit more pomegranate-y. But it's a pomegranate on its way. Just beautiful flowers all over the place. You can see some dry grass already there in the spring. This is from northern Cyprus, and I believe it's a wheat field. I know I got wheat fields, but I hope that's one. Just some of the flowers from the place. At least in April and May, I can say that Cyprus is a very nice smelling place. Like, there's just like a lot of flowers about, and they tend to be kind of fragrant. And I just remember I was visiting a little village that we'll talk more about later called Kalapaniotis. I think somebody had planted roses, but this village is one of those traditional villages that goes up the mountainside, right? And you had to kind of like walk up these sort of winding cobblestone areas and steps and all this kind of thing to get from one area of the town to the other. But it would just be like the smell of beautiful flowers would just kind of waft down the mountain, which was really lovely. This one's included for my wife. That is a, well, I think we would pronounce it pomelo, but they pronounced it pomelo, which somebody had brought. It's a very fertile place. Somebody had brought seeds of it from Israel many years ago, grown a tree, and actually I gave seeds of that to your aunt, Leonie.
There's all kinds of
So
stuff.
hopefully, I mean, I think it's maybe by the time that tree would grow, you know, maybe it's kind of an inheritance or something. But I did give her some of those, in part because they were given to me, and I was afraid to try to bring them through customs.
Yes, that was right.
So I don't know how this is actually going to work because this should. Oh, hey, look at that. So Cypriots have some really ancient and very delicious food. Just an observation there. So this is souvla being made.
The famous Cypriot souvla.
So and this was at the house of our former parishioner. Oh my gosh, brain's not working for me. Ileana, thank you. That was her brother-in-law making the souvla. So they have as a very ancient, very delicious food. I'll tell you the story in more detail later, but actually souvla played a major role in the conversion of St. Heraclius, the first Cypriot bishop. And then this is me, you know, I'm eating delicious Mediterranean fish and all this kind of thing, but I had to tease Matushka by drinking a Coca-Cola when it was offered to me. So I did not, however, I did not go to McDonald's in Cyprus. Among the sort of ancient foods that Cyprus is very famous for, I can never actually pronounce the word right. I want to call it komandaria, but it's actually, help me out, Leonie.
You said it well.
Oh, hey, there we go. I got the accent in the right place. Komandaria. So this is the only wine, as far as I'm aware, that's used for communion in Cyprus. It's the only wine that's used for communion. It's native Cypriot grapes. It has a naturally very high alcohol volume, about 15% before they. You would not fortify communion wine, but before some people use it as a fortified wine. It dates back at least to 800 BC. So like this is old, right? This is really, really old. And the reason, you know, it dates back to 800 BC, that's when we have the first people writing about it, right? So it probably goes back at least somewhat substantially beyond that. It acquired its modern name from the Crusader period, which, as you can see there, is quite long, right? Where the Latin commanders would often not allow Cypriots to drink the wine from their land, nor would they allow the common soldiers. So it's basically, I mean, you can just imagine these kind of medieval Latin warlord guys like drunk out of their mind in their little castles. That's pretty much, probably not as inaccurate as maybe they would like it to be. Richard the Lionhearted gave a line to this wine at his wedding. So Richard the Lionhearted was married in Cyprus under circumstances that can only be described as truly bizarre. But they brought out the wine, and he was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so his line from that, which has stuck with the wine through the ages, is, this is the wine of kings and the king of wines. Right? It's the wine of kings. And then, of course, the commanders decided that it was the wine of commanders. So another observation. Cyprus has a long and complicated history. Now, I don't even want to touch the, like, way before Alexander the Great stuff. I'm just going to keep us, like, sort of focused on the modern era, if you will, or the... But it's conquered, like virtually everything else in the world, by Alexander the Great in the year 333. and his kind of expanding empire that people are terrified to rebel against, for instance, it lasts for a little while longer beyond that. Alexander famously becomes ill on his way back from basically India and dies. I believe he dies in Iraq, modern Iraq. And after Alexander, his kingdom is set up, is split up between his generals with these kingdoms that become called the successor kingdoms, right? And one of those, probably the most famous down into the modern times, is the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies. Who's the most famous Ptolemaic ruler? Cleopatra. Cleopatra. But she's at the very end of Ptolemies, right? But so at this time, it's ruled by the Hellenistic, so the Greek Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. And basically the island becomes a Greek island, right? A culturally Greek island. In 58 BC, Rome decides we're taking this over because we're Rome. They attack it, officially make it a province in like 21 BC or something like that. I don't remember what their structure for it was. But it's ruled by Rome up until Richard the Lionhearted. Richard the Lionhearted, who conquers it in 1191, and from there on, Cyprus gets kind of politically punted between different Latin, like military monastic orders, like the Templars, and various other, sort of Italian interests and whatnot. But it gets kind of punted around between Latin kingdoms for quite some time until it's invaded by the Ottoman Turks, who then rule it for about 300 years. And in 1878, they don't formally cede control of it to the British, but they basically sell it to the British, right? I think it's 1912 that it's formally sort of annexed by the British Empire. But the British are in control from 1878. In 1860, the British, with very heavy concessions, agree to leave. Some of those concessions have been in the news lately. You probably remember during the beginning of the America-Iran, we call this the American-Iran War or the American-Iran whatever it is that's going on now, conflict. Like Iran starts like launching stuff at everybody, right? And one of the places they launched something at was Cyprus, of all things. Why? Because they believe the British to be generally in cahoots with the Americans, and there's a British air base that the Americans use for various things, but maybe not for this operation. But anyway, there's two British air bases, two British military installations that still exist on Cyprus. In 1974, I'll condense this somewhat. So in 1974, the Turkish government becomes nominally afraid that sort of Muslim and Turkish Cypriots are going to get oppressed, but in reality more afraid that Cyprus is going to politically unify itself to Greece. And so they invade. Most people that kind of express their opinions on this, most people in Cyprus who talked to me about this, and a lot of people wanted to talk about this, believe that the British gave them the wink. In other words, they think that the British and the Turks were actually in cahoots for the invasion. Whether that's true or not, I can't say. But northern Cyprus to this day, it's over a third of the territory of the island is occupied by a rump Turkish government. They call it the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, and it's full of giant symbols of dominion like this. When you drive across the border, right after you see the giant presidential palace, which almost nobody works at or inhabits, then you see the giant mosque, right? And then, you sort of look off at the mountains, and they've inscribed the Turkish and Turkish Cypriot flags on these large mountains, so everybody south of the border can see, we're the boss around here. And I will say, just as an aside, I did get to go into northern Cyprus. It's a very depressing place, right? Whereas you can see in the south, there's a lot of problems. Like youth are rowdy and they like to graffiti things and whatnot. But northern Cyprus is really not taken care of. And the wealth disparity, like the kind of like the people that sort of socially hang out with this mosque are of massively, it's hard to put into words. Like you've got like people in like shabby patched clothing driving cars from like the early 1990s, if they have cars at all. And then you've got sort of like these like Bentley dealerships that are like covered over, like you're driving by them and they've got like barbed wire around them so that the lessers don't get in and touch the cars, right? It's a strange place, and there's even whole regions of it that the Turkish government, for whatever reason, has just decided you're not allowed to rebuild this place, and so they string barbed wire around it. And it's acres and acres. In some places, as we were driving by it, it's like you're going down a street in a town, and they've like barbed wired the one side, and for like 20 acres in that direction, nobody's allowed in. And they've got like little signs on it that say, "We'll shoot you if you show up." Like if you try to get in this, like they got little military guys holding their rifles. You're not allowed in here. Meanwhile, the other side of the street, there are hovels. Right? It's like, so like they allow people to continue to live on the one side of the street, but not the other. Also, since I'm off on North Cyprus just a little bit, the symbols of dominion are very present. A lot of times, unlike maybe other places and other circumstances, they did not convert well, first of all, they didn't even have a population to do it, but they didn't convert a lot of the churches into mosques. They just leave them sit as like corpses lying in the field, right? It's like it's a desecrated church. It's a shattered church. Most of them you're not allowed to go to or go into. Again, they've got the barbed wire around them or whatever, but it's there to let you know that the Turkish government is in charge here, right? I didn't get to see this with my own eyes, but I've seen it on video and whatnot. All the cemeteries in northern Cyprus are similarly desecrated. They took all the crosses, hacked them to bits, and threw them on the ground. And they lie on the top of the ground. They don't bury them or anything like that because it's a strange place.
You didn't spend the night there, but did you get out of the car and walk around?
A little bit. Well, and I will say, and the places that we did get out of the car and walk around, it's like, I guess you could say they did me a favor in the stolen church of the Apostle Barnabas by like waving me in without making me pay. Because they've got pay guys. It's like they've turned it basically into a museum, and that's one of the lucky buildings, right? One of the lucky buildings. All right. So other things that I learned in my time in Cyprus. The apostles were very, very active in Cyprus. And I don't claim, because I'm not claiming to be an expert on Cyprus. Again, this is kind of my journey, the things that I learned. It could be that if I poked under certain other rocks or whatever, I would have found stories about other apostles, right? But at the very least, Barnabas, Mark, Paul, St. John the Theologian, and St. Andrew visited Cyprus. St. Barnabas was actually Cypriot. And we actually don't need to go any farther to learn that than the scriptures themselves. And Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, who was called Barnabas by the apostles, having land, not land in Cyprus, mind you, having land, sold it and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. Okay? Because these places are close to one another, right? Now it's not like, you're not going to just take a day and go visit Cyprus in those days. It's over 100 miles away, right? But you can get there. You can get there and be back. So St. Barnabas was Cypriot. He was deeply involved in the initial Cypriot mission. And when they, again from Acts, this is the leaders of the church of Antioch, had fasted and prayed, they laid hands on Paul and Barnabas and sent them away, and they sailed to Cyprus. Right? So this is where St. Paul does his very first work as an ordained person and does his very first work as a missionary, right? As a formal sort of sent person by the church. A little bit later in Acts, Paul and Barnabas are not getting along so well at this particular point. There arose such a disagreement that they separated from one another, and Barnabas took Mark and sailed away to Cyprus. Right? So Barnabas goes back to Cyprus. And tradition holds that Barnabas was the consecrator of St. Heraclius of Tamassos, who was the first bishop in Cyprus. Right? So this would be actually, right here we have St. Heraclius from his monastery. Okay. This is a beautiful, it's part of a fresco from the monastery of St. Heraclius. And I will give a little bit of background on this. So I mentioned in the Suvla note that Suvla had something to do with the conversion of St. Heraclius. And it did in the following way. His father was a pagan. Well, all the native Cypriots that weren't like Jewish were pagans, right? But his father was a pagan priest. I don't remember which god. But obviously as a polytheist, he probably could, sort of take turns at different temples or whatever if he wanted to. But his father was a pagan priest. And he lived in the rough region of what is now Nicosia. And when Paul and Barnabas were journeying across Cyprus, the pagan priest wanted to be nice to these random Jewish strangers, right? And so he brought out his wonderful meat that he had sacrificed to the pagan gods earlier in the day and made suvla out of, right? It's like, hey, you have a guest, you want to hey, this is my best food, right? Well, Paul and Barnabas, as both as Jews and as Christians, cannot eat something sacrificed to a pagan god. And so they kind of hey man, we don't want to offend you, but, So the priest isn't particularly offended, at least not initially. He isn't particularly offended, and they say, hey, we're trying to go to the other side of the island. We want to go to Paphos. Do you know someone that can take us? And the priest says, sure. My son is a teenager. He can lead you there. So St. Heraclius, the son, you see over here, I assume that is the father over there kind of giving his son over to the apostles. So they set out with him. As they're traveling to Paphos, Heraclius has a question in his heart. And he says, why didn't you eat my father's meat? And it's this question that begins the teaching of the gospel with him. Right? It's this very question. So you have actually here Paul and Barnabas conversing with him about the gospel. They come to a certain place where there's water, and Heraclius says, I too want to be a Christian. I want to be baptized. And so he's baptized. Let's say that's a beautiful, beautiful fresco. So this is the probable historical and biblical setting for Heraclius' conversion from Acts chapter 13. And when Paul and Barnabas reached Salamis, that's in eastern Cyprus, they began to proclaim the word of God in the synagogues of the Jews. And they also had John as their helper. And when they had gone through the whole island as far as Paphos, okay, this is probably the journey that Heraclius converts on, they found a certain magician, a Jewish false prophet whose name was Bar-Jesus, who was with the proconsul Sergius Paulus, a man of intelligence. Now, I will mark there. So we're going to another local story. We're going to pass from the story of Heraclitus to another one here. So Sergius Paulus, a smart fellow. This man summoned Barnabas and Saul and sought to hear the word of God. But Elymas the magician, for thus his name is translated, was opposing them, seeking to turn the proconsul away from the faith. But Saul, who was also known as Paul, filled with the Holy Spirit, fixed his gaze upon him and said, "You who are full of all deceit and fraud, you son of the devil, you enemy of all righteousness, will you not cease to make crooked the straight ways of the Lord? And now behold, the hand of the Lord is upon you, and you will be blind and not see the sun for a time." And immediately a mist of darkness fell upon Elymas, and he went about seeking those who would lead him by the hand. Then the proconsul believed when he saw what had happened, being amazed at the teaching of the Lord. So that's the Acts of the Account version, Acts of the Apostles version. You know, one thing that we need to remember about the Scriptures is that they're true and reliable, but they don't teach us literally everything that ever happened, right? If you go to the Scriptures looking for that, you're really doing kind of a fool's errand. I mean, you know, what are the Scriptures going to teach you about the historical character of the Han Emperor in China or something like that, right? So outside of the Scriptures, Cypriot tradition holds that that when Paul came to Paphos, initially this Elymas Bar Jesus got the upper hand and was able to get Paul publicly flogged as a malefactor. And the tradition holds that this first century pillar is in fact where they placed him, where they tied him as they were going to give him the lash. So this is St. Paul's pillar in the city of Paphos. If I have another map coming up, Paphos is really, it's in the far southwest of the island. So I've marked this slide the first official convert. As we read in Acts, Sergius Paulus, boy, it auto-corrected me, I guess, proconsul of Cyprus, stationed in Paphos in the early 40 ADs, was the first significant Roman official to convert to Christianity. There were several senators not long after that by that name, like several in the historical record, and it is believed that he also was one of those senators. So he may have been the first Christian Roman senator as well. Anyway, I have this image of a baptismal font here from a floor mosaic that's preserved at the Gikos Monastery. And then also just as a symbol of entering into communion, this is the very interesting Cypriot paten, which doesn't seem to be in use all over Cyprus, but there are places in Cyprus where instead of putting a veil over the discos, you have this crown, which is kind of neat. This is especially associated, I would say, with the Gikos Monastery, and I don't know, where it comes from or whatever. Similarly, there are crowns placed on chalices as well. So they sort of like a crown over top, and I have one of those in one of the pictures here at some point or other. Okay, second among the Gentiles. So after Antioch, Cypriots understand their local church to be the second church among the Gentiles. So chronologically, that makes them sort of third after Jerusalem. And if you read the Acts of the Apostles closely, that's actually a pretty fair reading. You even have like people coming to Antioch from Cyprus in Acts of the Apostles and preaching to them, right? And especially this idea of the conversion of the Gentiles. This untitled picture here is the mausoleum over top of the original tomb of St. Barnabas. Okay. A history of autocephaly. So Cyprus is a very old church. It's also been self-governed for a long time, long time. it had an independent tradition back really to the time of the apostles, but it was formally granted self-governance at the Third Ecumenical Council in 431, and that's something that really has not been challenged since, right? Except by the Latins, but that's another story. So it's granted self-governance. It has an independent synod. I'm not sure if there are 12 or 13 members. I sort of found what seemed to be conflicting information about that. But there are 13 bishops in Cyprus. This is the most famous recent Archbishop of Cyprus. I don't think I'm going to say too much about him later, so I'll say a little bit about him now. This is Makarios III, who is not only a former Archbishop of Cyprus, but also the first president of the Cypriot Republic. So, speaking of people who were considered malefactors, the British, so he became elected Archbishop of Cyprus, and the British became very aware that he was interested in getting out from under British rule, something that they kind of had promised during the Second World War. You know, send us troops to help us fight the Germans and maybe we'll let you go, right? It's like Pharaoh won't let them out of Egypt or something like that. But there's like sort of dithering after that. And Archbishop Makarios is understood to be an ethnarch. Now this is a relic of Ottoman Turkey, right? An ethnarch is someone that the Turks would look at and say, you know, we Turks are in charge of this giant empire, but we know there are non-Turks that live here. Who's the person that has to represent and answer for them? And ultimately, in Turkey, in Ottoman Turkey, the person that they considered the real ethnarch was the Patriarch of Constantinople. This is the ethnarch of the Romans, right? Not to be confused with the Latins. That's the Roman Catholic guys. But of the Byzantine Romans, right? So Makarios is understood as kind of an ethnarch. And the British government is quite aware that he wants Cypriot, probably union with Greece, not just independence. But he wants to be done with the British rule. And so they kidnap him, actually. They kidnap him and send him to another island that they own called Seychelles, where he establishes orthodoxy. I don't know if it persists there, but he does establish some orthodoxy in Seychelles. Then they decide he's not quite kidnapped enough, so they send him to British Kenya, where he has a massive hand in starting the Orthodox missionary movement in Kenya. So much so that the seminary in Kenya is named for him, like the Orthodox seminary. And people in Cyprus, several people came to me at various points and said, you know, Father, there are more Orthodox Christians in Kenya than there are Cypriots. You know, like wow. But this is something, done by Archbishop Makarios when he was a captive. Then I think they took him to Britain for a while, and then they, probably put him in the Tower. And then they let him go to Greece, but under their watchful eye. Well, finally they said, okay, we're gonna let Cyprus be independent, and he was able to return to the island, and the people wanted their ethnarch as their political leader as well as their spiritual leader, right? Because that's kind of how he was interpreted. And so he was president through most of the time from Cypriot independence in 1960 to his death in 1977. And unfortunately, people who resisted him, that they really wanted a union with Greece and this kind of stuff, and didn't like the fact that he seemed to have switched places and seemed to have embraced this idea of national independence. But basically there was a lot of civil strife, and then also like just kind of paramilitary strife, guerrilla kind of stuff around the edges in Cyprus. Makarios ended up being assaulted in the presidential palace, and he had to flee. They put him in, they shoved him into a car and drove him to the edge. I think they drove him to Paphos, and got him out of the country. But then, so it's what's going to happen to Cyprus? And of course, these kind of, union with Greece people are like, yeah, we got the country now, except that the Turkish army invaded almost immediately. Right? So like a lot of those people, and people, obviously this is still kind of a raw topic for certain people, but definitely there's a sentiment among many people that like the people that were sort of like, let's get rid of Makarios, really were kind of malefactors, that they brought something about that was predictable and that should, like, this Turkish invasion is an obvious consequence of trying to politically unite with Greece, right? So anyway, so he was the archbishop as well as the president, and I think his legacy is somewhat controversial. Certainly canonically, you can't be both a bishop and a politician. Like, that's a Roman Catholic thing. Right? And I mean that very specifically. Like, I mean, the Pope is both to this day. And from the time of the late 700s, he has been both the head of a temporal country and the head of the Roman Church. Right? In our canon law, clergymen may not hold civil office. So I'm sorry. I think probably the bishop would bless me if we become desperately impoverished. I think he probably would bless me to become like a postal worker or a policeman no, not a policeman actually, for a lot of reasons. But he certainly would not allow me to dethrone the mayor of State College, for instance. Okay, so back to sort of the apostles. St. Barnabas, a native Cypriot, was buried in Cyprus. And so this is an icon that none of his relics remain at this site. I don't think they were present before the Turkish invasion, thankfully. I think that his relics had been removed to a different place. But this is the crypt where his body was originally placed in the middle of the 1st century. And this is where it is, right? Other apostles in Cyprus. St. Andrew briefly stopped in the panhandle of Cyprus. I can't remember the story directly. I think maybe they had some trouble with the boat or something like that. I mean, something as pedestrian as that, right? Maybe there was a storm. I don't remember. But he briefly stopped in the panhandle, and in the course of his very brief visit, as he was there, a miraculous stream came forth from the ground, which still flows, and Cypriots visit it, to pray, to ask God, for certain types of mercies, a sick loved one, this kind of thing. They'll carry the water of it back to one another as a blessing. I will say, related to that, I think it's even more of a pilgrimage destination, or numerically it's far less, but it's a more exotic one now because it's deep in it's as deep as you could possibly be in the occupied territory. And the Turks are, predictably fairly nasty there. There's still a monk who lives there from before the invasion. He's 86 and has been a monk at that place for 65 years. They just continue to put the screws to him. You could just let the old man alone. But, now he's only allowed to do one liturgy a month at this. And they've set up like a bazaar in front of it. So, you go in, but it's like you've got the money changers hawking their stuff and all that. But that's where Apostolos Andreas is. This is a picture of the exterior of the monastery. I believe all that is up there used to be cells, but are not inhabited anymore, because, there's one monk. And he actually is basically serving as a parish priest for some of the people that didn't flee to the south after the invasion. So, this is actually a fairly typical Cypriot iconostasis. but this is the one from Apostolos Andreas. I'm sure I know I'm gonna come back to this, but some distinctive features. Very typically an iconostas, you can't see it from this photo, but they tend to be bent downwards towards you, right? Like the top of them, it's like, so they come up like this and then they bend down. And the idea with that is so that you can actually see the icons that are up high, right? I mean, the icons exist for us to venerate them, for us to offer prayers before them, and so the idea is make them more accessible. You almost always have a cross on the top of the Cypriot iconostas. I think I saw one or two exceptions to that, but almost always the cross sticking up, and then the Mother of God on one side of it, and St. John the Theologian on the other. We'll come back to that at a later point, I'm sure. This is the altar from Apostolos Andreas, and this is actually a good kind of, I don't know, teaching point or whatever, but sort of notice things. This is a very common thing in Cyprus as well. These large altars that have these like canopies built into them over top. These canopies built in over top. That's a very, very common style and something that's very different than our churches here. Another thing I'll mention, since we're behind the iconostas in this church, I don't have a photo of one in here, although I have some photos of them. Typically OCA churches, not universally, but typically over the table of preparation, we have an icon of the Nativity of Christ. On Cyprus, it is not universally, but almost always an icon of extreme humility, right? So that the Lenten, like the main icon that we leave in the church in Lent. Okay. If you've heard me say this before, you're not allowed to answer the question. I said almost all the Cypriot preparation tables. I will give someone $600 if they can guess the icon that's on the other preparation table that I saw in Cyprus. Nobody's no. You guys don't want to take my money. Thank you. God bless you. You're kind. You're very kind people. No. So Melchizedek, who sets forth bread and wine. Ooh, neat.
Wow.
Tell the bishop, if he gives us some like low interest loan for a church, we'll put Melchizedek in the table of preparation. Okay, this is so again, it's occupied by the Turks. It's actually under construction, like in the back. They're like doing some refurbishment and rebuilding. This actually is the current iteration of the spring that came forth at the time of the Apostle Andrew. You know what though? I went to it. I pushed my face in the water, and it's a beautiful experience. These up here, I believe, are largely like intentions that people have brought, and like Lord help my grandmother, and so on and so forth, right? Up there tied to the bush. Okay, another thing about Cyprus. Lazarus fled to Cyprus. And this is a Cypriot icon of Lazarus. Very, very distinctive looking, right? He's got kind of short hair, white hair. Some of the icons actually have no beard, but then some of them have this one has a very, very thin, hard to see beard. Which is peculiar, and you wonder, like, is there some historical referent behind that? It's kind of like with the icons, like a lot of the icons of the apostles, whether it's forgive me, but like Matthias or Bartholomew or whoever. I mean, they're just kind of like generic stock figures, right? But when you look at like the icons of Peter and Paul, when you have a deep tradition there of like the kind of fluffy white hair and the short white beard, and then to be honest with St. Paul, who would make the like little hair island in the middle of his head unless he actually had it, right? What, am I wrong?
That's just a funny description.
Okay, so Lazarus fled to Cyprus. This is not in the scriptures, right? This is post biblical, basically. I mean, not really post the writing of the New Testaments, but so from John we have, but the chief priests took counsel that they might put Lazarus to death. Also, because on account of him, many of the Judeans, I translated Jews as Judeans, which I think is a fair translation given that they're in Judea. Many of the Judeans were believing in Jesus. This did not stop after the resurrection, right? Like every so often, the chief priests and rulers of Judea, were like, there's more Christians now. Maybe somebody should whack Lazarus. And he lives in a suburb, right, of Jerusalem. So at some point or other, when they get mad enough, they're going to go get him. And, Lazarus is a human being. And at a certain point he says, I'm not living like this. Like, I wasn't brought back from the dead to be like, like a hunted animal. So, he decides to leave. And again, Cyprus is not that far away, but it's far enough away that the authorities in Judea, aren't going to really have much power to come get him. So he flees to the east coast of Cyprus, where he settles in a city called Kidion, which is modern Larnaca. And this is the cracked one on the right. I wish I got a better picture. Is understood to be the original second tomb of Lazarus, which is very, very cool. So Lazarus leaves Judea as a Christian layman, but he doesn't stay a Christian layman for the rest of his life. He ends up being ordained and consecrated bishop. So after the ministry of Barnabas, it's the trip of the Apostle John to Cyprus. Ooh, okay, my editor is in trouble there. But it's the trip of the Apostle John to Cyprus that was the most impactful. And this is because he came with the Theotokos herself. He was on his way to Ephesus, and as is very, it's right there in the middle. It's not surprising that people would stop, in Cyprus on their way to eastern Turkey, right? So he brought the Theotokos, and tradition holds that she actually had made clothes for Lazarus, which oh my goodness, what just a human thing, and the Mother of God made clothes for you. But she, as we know from tradition, the Theotokos from her youth was a seamstress, and made clothes for Lazarus and wanted to stop and bring them. And when that is happening, St. John says, we really need a bishop in Kidion. Guess what, bub? We're gonna ordain you. And so Lazarus becomes the first bishop of Kidion. This is the relics of St. Lazarus that remain at the Church of St. Lazarus in Larnaca. You could see this is not a whole human body. And the culprit behind that is a certain Emperor Leo the Wise, who basically, at one point or other, sent emissaries. He had a great devotion for Lazarus, and like any Byzantine emperor, he wanted all the relics of his city. So he sent emissaries. To the people of Larnaca and to the bishop, and said, we would like the relics of Lazarus. We'll take most of them, but we'll definitely leave you with something, and in return, I'll build you a giant church. Right? And but this is the emperor, so this is kind of like an offer you can't refuse. And the people didn't refuse it, right? So they transferred most of Lazarus's relics. I believe that is his skull that remains in Larnaca, and those are obviously large portions of, I assume, like arm and leg bones and this sort of thing. Okay. So Cypriots love St. John the Theologian. He's present beside the Theotokos in front of virtually every Cypriot iconostas, which, again, when you think about, he's the one that brought the Theotokos to us. right? Like in the flesh. We like him a lot. And so this is just a little chapel, and it's actually kind of grainy there, but it's John the theologian. John the theologian. So he's present beside her. I have seen exceptions to this, but almost every. I mean, it's well upwards of 90%, at least of what I saw, and I was in a lot of churches. John the theologian is immediately to the right hand of the Theotokos. Our left, her right. And then he's also at the top of most Cypriot iconostases, as I said, standing by the cross. But again, this is the Cypriot Church classically has had a great love for St. John the theologian. Here's another example of it. Here he is right here. Another example from another place. Here he's just, this is the kind of the stock image, the cross, the crucifixion, standing up with the Holy Theotokos and St. John. I mean, that's common in lots of different art from other peoples as well, right? Westerners, other Orthodox people, but because of St. John being the only apostle who attended Christ at the cross, right? Okay, Cypriots really, really love the Mother of God. I don't know, maybe there's a way, maybe I can put it into like Gemini and get like an honest answer, but I'm probably too scared to try this particular query. But a huge percentage of parishes and monasteries in Cyprus are Panagia of X, right? Virgin Mary of such and such a place. And many of them have their own unique icons of the Theotokos as well. So just a couple of them here. We'll see this one in the slideshow as well. But this is the Virgin of Makeras, right? And so when I talk about the Makeras Monastery, it's named ultimately, for the Virgin Mary, but for this icon, right? If you talk about the main church in the city of Ayanapa, this is their icon, right? And I don't think all, but most Cypriot places that are named for the Virgin Mary have their own unique styling of the Theotokos icon. The most famous of them all, this is not the best image of the image, but the most famous of them all is the Yikos icon of the Mother of God, which is this one right here. And there was someone in Cyprus, I think it was a monk, who was trying to talk to me about, how Christ is positioned in this icon a little bit. But he himself was not expressing like certainty. He's like, normally in the icons, Christ is positioned in such a way that the Theotokos is on his right. Right? But there's definitely this tradition of icons where he's like slid over to the left. Right? So it's like it's our left, right? But but wait a minute, but so it's still his left though, right? He's still she's still off to the left. I'm hoping, dear brethren, that in a future adult ed, I'm trying to hunt down an iconographer who can come and speak to us on the topic of icons of the Theotokos, because there's so much variation and so much going on in them, and I think it would be really wonderful to have somebody who has an education in that subject to be able to talk with us and say, okay, you see, the Theotokos seems to be looking at us in this one, this is what that's doing, or the Theotokos is looking at Christ, this is what that's doing, Anyway, very, very curious about that sort of thing.
Question, Father. So how did you get that picture? Because that icon is covered.
Oh, geez, no, that's some random icon on a wall somewhere. So there's all kinds of representations. Yeah. So actually, the original Yikos icon. Let's see how I'm doing on time here. Ooh boy. The original Yikos icon has not actually been looked at by human eyes for over 300 years. But it is very celebrated in Cyprus. Again, it is sort of the principal icon of Theotokos. It is said to be composed by St. Luke. There's a huge story about how it got to Cyprus, how they were able to twist the emperor's arm the other way and extract the icon from him. But also, it's something particularly sacred to the Cypriot people. So they actually have a building that I'll show you towards the end here, called the Throne of the Theotokos, the Throni. And they will take the icons during times of that icon during times of terrible national calamity, and offer great intercession, and sometimes drawing thousands and thousands of people to come up and pray at this throne of the Theotokos, right? That actually happened for the first time in 30 years last year. And it was because their drought was, I think, about to enter its 5th year. Very, very bad. Very, very bad. Like we're talking potential ecological change here, like things are not looking good. And they went in either November or December of last year and prayed for rain. And you know what? They had a nice wet winter, by God's grace. Fervent intercession is powerful.
Why is nobody allowed to look at it?
That's a really good question. I actually, again, I'm not out of humility. So it's, but it's so, and it is covered. Actually, the next icon that I will show you will be illustrative of that. It is covered in something like this, in this like oak-clad kind of stuff, right? So this kind of metal, in this case metal with a bunch of gems and pearls and ivory and this sort of thing in it. Now this is the also very, very ancient Makeras icon. It's over 1,000 years old. Some ascribe it to St. Luke. I feel like unlike the Geikos icon, where people are kind of more in the boat of this may have been by St. Luke, this one is kind of like, well, it's a really old icon of the Theotokos. But there are people that ascribe it to St. Luke. It's very cool. I got to pray the Akathis to the Theotokos in front of this icon. In fact, actually, the Makeras people set me right. I didn't know that it was the icon. I didn't know anything. They actually set me on a chair that faced that, and had me every time I was at the services. They treated me with great honor and respect, for which I'm profoundly grateful. But one of the ways that they were respecting me that I didn't even realize I was being respected was they put me in front of that icon, and that's where I was for all the services. So, it was right beside the bishop's chair. Okay, just a couple more things, and then I'm going to kind of take us on a rapid tour through, some sort of beautiful places and things that I saw in Cyprus. Cyprus has a piece of the True Cross, a large piece of the True Cross, that comes from the time of St. Helen. She left it there in around 326, and actually established this monastery on a place called Stavrovouni, which means essentially Cross Mountain. Okay, it's the sort of highest mountain in southeast Cyprus, and it really commands. I mean, you can see the sea in 3 directions and this sort of thing. Anyway, unlike the icon at Geikos, the relics of the cross are brought out periodically. But we were talking before we started, about holy water, and holy water is water. And so when somebody like Father Ignatius at his first parish as a sort of energetic young priest throws it on the chandelier lights, they go kapow, right? Because holy water is still water, right? And similarly, when we think about things like I'll go back. Like the Makeras icon here, so they have this behind special glass. That is the real, ancient, untouched face of that icon. But if we all go and kiss it, that face will not be there very long. It'll be there a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations. It'll be gone, right? Just the same way if you see old stone steps and people walking up them for hundreds of years, they become smooth, right? So at Stavrobouni, they do not bring the cross out very often, right? Not very often, because if people are, kissing whatever directly the wood itself, it will disintegrate. Like that's just how things work in reality. But they keep it inside this ceremonial large cross. I'll pass this around, and so you can venerate that, which is good. I mean, hey, I'm inches from the true cross of Christ. This is not bad. Okay? Okay. Cyprus is very Christian, but not all Christians are good Christians. This is from that UNESCO World Heritage site that I mentioned. And, if you ask most of the locals who gouged the eyes out of these icons, right? If you ask most of the locals, they'll say, those darn Turks. If you ask the priest of that town, he will say, those darn Turks would have shredded the icons. They would not have come in with a pocket knife and carefully gouged the eyes out. And his suspicion was that this is magic we're dealing with. Can I drink a potion made from icon eyes? His suspicion, whether or not he's right, I don't know. But it's very striking. Like all the ones that are kind of on like normal human level, somebody went through and gouged the eyes out of. I just saw it like, ooh. Another thing that I'm not sure what to make of, is somebody explained. This is not a good picture, and I wish I probably have a better one, but I wasn't able to find it. But these are like babies made of wax, or like an arm made of wax, or a foot made of wax, or whatever. And I'm not quite sure whether they are meant to be, and maybe Leonie, you can help me with this, but they're like, either they're Thanksgiving for like my foot got healed and I'm coming back and giving thanks, or it's like maybe I'm suffering from infertility and I want a baby, and so I kind of offer the image of a baby in order to get a baby. One of the priests was trying to explain this to me at one point, but unfortunately our conversation got kind of interrupted. But he had said that, at some point or other, like maybe there were people offering images of like here's my terracotta baby that I've made or whatever, and again I'm very fuzzy on this, so maybe I'm wrong about this, but like somebody said to the villagers, the only things you can offer in the church are incense, wine, wax. And they're like, aha, wax! Don't know if that's true or not. But that's what I was kind of half told.
Where was that?
That specifically, that phenomenon is not uncommon around Cyprus. You could find it in a lot of places. But that was Kalopaniotis, the little village with the UNESCO World Heritage chapel in it. So Cyprus is full of beautiful places, and I'm just going to take you on a whirlwind tour, and we'll kind of wrap up at that, and I'll give you some time for questions. I also have a couple of things. First of all, I have oil from Apostolos Andreas that, either if you would like me to anoint you with it, I can, but I invite you to anoint yourselves with it. So this is from Apostolos Andreas on the northern tip. And then I also have Commandaria, so the church wine. I was able to bring a little bottle back with me, and so I think we can kind of divide this in an orderly manner, and each, be able to sort of have that flavor of Cyprus, if you will. But we'll do that. We'll do that at the end there. So Cyprus is full of beautiful places. This is the Gikos Monastery. The lighting wasn't the best when I was taking this picture, but it's stunning. The interior of the church there. Gikos is an interesting monastery. It is unabashedly very wealthy. I don't know exactly how to say it. Unlike most of the monasteries in Western Europe or even in Greece or whatever, Geikos was never stripped of the inheritance holdings that it had received over generations, right? So actually, they have gilded that entire iconostas. So that's a real gold on that one. Most Cypriot iconostases, not all of them, but most of them are gold colored. Like that's kind of a theme. But this is like actual gold. Again, people have very ambivalent feelings about Geikos. Like there's some love and maybe some tension with it. This is their altar table. Again, you have these kind of exquisitely carved, almost to the point of making me uncomfortable as an Orthodox Christian, angelic figures. And then you have this practice, which was explained to me. This is a pretty old, specifically Cypriot practice of having a second reserved sacrament in a dove-shaped container hanging over the altar. But that is present at Geikos, that preserves that kind of, and that I'm pretty sure that's a solid gold dove with slot for the reserved sacrament. So this is the throne, the throne of the Theotokos. It's associated with the Geikos monastery. It's right beside it, and it's where Archbishop Macarius III is buried in a different spot. But here I have a special message for our bishop.
I have to tell Archbishop Melchizedek that he gets major play. This is the shrine of the tomb of Macarius III, the president of Cyprus and Archbishop. And here we are at the top. This is the shrine itself.
That's the throne of the Theotokos.
We passed to get up here. All manner of saints, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And as we approached, we saw the saints of Cyprus, and then various Old Testament figures, and then this colonnade back here, or maybe not a colonnade.
I should have tested this first.
With these large shrines of the Holy Apostles. And I started by showing Christ there, but the Archbishop will definitely be interested to know that opposite Christ, at the very top, we come to Melchizedek. He also was present.
maybe our own bishop there, but yeah. So these are, I said, the last thing I just said, and so at the end here I just have sort of a group of some, I think, photos that I think are beautiful from my visit. This is the courtyard of the church, and that is the church building there, the UNESCO church I was talking about in Kalopaniotis. This is part of its ceiling. It's actually not one church, but 3 of them that were built successively. So there's actually 3 different altar areas, and this sort of thing. This is the village of Kalopaniotis itself. Just kind of beautiful, built up the hillside. There are a lot of villages like this in the Troodos Mountains. This is shrine of Saint Epiphanius of Salamis in Agia Napa. And Agia Napa, actually, in southeastern Cyprus, is called that because it means like holy wood or holy forest. And it's called that because Saint Epiphanius used to retreat there and pray, right? And so the people started calling it the Holy Wood because their bishop would pray there. This is the same church with some guys who've just done a baptism in front of it. This is Uncle Zanetto. So this is Leonie's Uncle Zanetto, who extended a great deal of hospitality towards me. And behind him is the Russian church. It's probably Panagia something. But it's the Russian church near Nicosia. This is its iconostas. This is some of its, they're really going for the the Cypriot art is this other stuff. We've got like Western style art here. And this is very, so this is the baptism of Rus from that church. This is an interesting icon that's in the back. So this is the Makeras, the Yikos icon, the famous icon, right? The Yikos icon of the Mother of God. And they have a beautiful made in stone icon that there's only one place in the world they could have got it from, St. Elizabeth's in Minsk. That is the Yikos icon. They have that up there for veneration as like the main veneration icon in the Russian Church. So you've got and then you've got sort of the apostles. I assume that's Paul based on the length of the name, but I can't make anything out. It's all blurry. But you've got the apostles handing the church to the bishops, right? Like we've passed you something, and you need to maintain it until the end of all things, right? I will say, slightly catty, on the other wall, there's the Russian man who donated the church, passing it to the Cypriot bishop. I mean, like the church building, that is. So, complete with extremely lifelike and clear to the picture representations of his wife and his kids and his business partners and so forth. This is the beautiful monastery of Makeras, where I spent my first time in Cyprus, and with their abbot is also a bishop, and is a beautiful man, and I had great peace in his presence. And I would definitely recommend anybody that visits Cyprus to visit the Makeras and the St. Heraclitus monastery as well. This is just part of the courtyard from Makeras. This is their giant, I think, Athonite style chandelier. This is something that I absolutely adored. I don't think it comes out very well in the picture, but the icons are made in such a way that it looks like the angels are holding up. What is it? What are they holding up? Are they holding up the roof of the church? Are they holding up the vault of the heavens? It's just really beautiful. Really. So like these are like it's kind of three-dimensional, right? And so this is like the bottom line, and they're all kind of like holding it up. This is the carved icon of Our Lady of Makeras from the chair of honor. It was the only one in the place that had that, but that's what they sat me on, and so I was like that was the back part of the backstop of it. I like this image a lot. This is approximately 4 a.m. At the Makeras Monastery. And there's like this trail of open doors. The main gate is closed, but if you're a visitor, there's like a trail of open doors with a little bit of light behind you, and then you go to the next door and this sort of thing. And you wend your way in, and you find the monks praying the midnight office in the back of the church, and then they're going to proceed into the church for matins and so forth. But that was a really beautiful experience. It's kind of a meaningful picture to me. And then finally, this is my last picture from the presentation here. But this is just, again, you probably can't quite make it out perfectly, but this is a view from Stavrovouni, looking at the sea south of Cyprus. And if you see the blue line up there, that's the sea. So anyway, it's a beautiful place, and I'm very, very glad that I was able to go there. Before we get to the sort of oil and the wine and sort of things, anybody have any questions for me?
I had a couple of just kind of like more like cultural questions. How did you find the language barrier? Because you're not fluent in Greek, are you?
Oh, what?
I didn't mean.
Not only, like it's like okay, after 5 days at Makeras, it's like I'm starting to get the beginning of like, okay, that's more honorable than the cherubim, or okay, that's most holy Theotokos, save us, this kind of stuff. I'm like just barely. But then with the modern Greek, which is a very different language, right? I mean, it's a very I mean, it's very much like the difference between like our present English and like old to middle English, right? It's not, and that's something that was said to me, you know, by people. You know, one of the monks was kind of lamenting that one of the sores in the heart of the Church of Cyprus is that it's so hard for people to understand liturgical Greek, but yet at the same time, it's like, how can we move off of liturgical Greek? Because, like, I mean, especially for the scriptures, this is the language it was written in. Like, how can we go away from it? Anyways, that's a hard tension. It's a really hard tension. Anyway.
But for conversing with, like, even the non-clergy, you know, just the people who lived on the island,
Right. Yes. So, let's just say, like, a good thing about visiting Cyprus, and this is very much versus a Greek island or mainland Greece, is that because they were a British colony, English is that much more present. Like, I definitely encountered, you know, occasionally like a monk or a gas station attendant or something like that, who like had no English, right? But
also tourism is their main moneymaker, so they have to speak English to speak to
yeah.
tourists.
Yeah, and the tourists generally, and even the guest workers, you know, like, so they've got I was surprised. Oh, I wish I'd have got a photo of her. There was a lady from like Nepal with one of those like straw hats that are like a cone, you know, riding a bicycle across the Cypriot road, and I'm like, that's amazing. But even like the Nepalese people, you know, that come in as like hotel cleaning ladies and this sort of stuff, they tend to have some English, right? And that's how they communicate with other people there. So English is very prominent, very prominent, but not universal. Right? I sat across from a monk who was a confessor, which is a real joy when I was at Macaras. He can't hear anything anymore because the Turks beat him so badly in the head that he lost his hearing forever during the invasion. But I can tell you that before the invasion, pretty sure he didn't speak any English either. But it was, I could see him grappling with where I was from. Yeah, it was a joy to sit. And again, they put me across from him as a mark of honor. And he would cut his lemons in half and hand me the other half of the lemon. Which, by the way, I will say that's something, I don't know how I could ever institute this in this country, but like having lemons on hand to make your food better is awesome. So, just saying.
So did he do sign language? Or, I mean...
He can write.
Okay.
He did not, as far as I know, he didn't do any sign. He would write notes to people.
But I mean, in terms of them communicating with him...
He would write to them. I watched it.
You would have to write to him in order to...
Correct.
Or does he lip read, maybe? I don't know.
Well, he doesn't lip read in English for sure. I'm sure there's some lip reading there for sure, but he definitely didn't always have understanding of like when he was vocalizing, because like sometimes he would really inappropriately vocalize during the services. You know, again, it's not. I don't say that like that's not a character thing at all. It's just clearly he didn't know I'm making noise. Like,
You can't hear it.
Like when you met Andreas and like Leo's uncle, did they welcome you like you were family?
Oh yes, definitely.
I would think I would be like.
And even some people that you know had no connection to us were, you know, I think probably the nicest thing anybody did for me in Cyprus was I had two different people offer for me to come and stay with them. You know, when I left Macaras, because I went over, all I knew was that I was going to spend like 6 days at Macaras. And this old man, Ioannis Kyriakidis, he was in one of the photos there, just as kind of a blurry side guy. But he's about 80 years old, and you know, he like sought me out and said, "You're an American. My daughter lives in Houston, Texas. You know, when you leave here, I want you to stay at my house." So I did, and I mean, and actually they were beyond kind. And I've actually put a you know, there is a great hospitality in a lot of the old Cypriots. and it's interesting because, so for Mr. Kyriakidis, they brought me there, and then like, they're like, oh, let's wash your clothes. I was like, really? Like, you know, they're like, God bless you. Okay, so they did. And then like, I was going to leave, and they're like, oh no, we need to wash your clothes again before you leave. You know, so, but like, just really, you know, fed me, took me around, you know, whatever. But Mr. Kyriakidis was absolutely incensed at the Gikos Monastery because it took me forever to try to get up there, like to make contact with a human, and like, no, you got to go through this other guy or whatever. And he's like, his sense of hospitality was mortified. Like he was ready to go up there and beat them. So anyway, but yeah, no, and Andreas was awesome. I was going to spend a second day with him, and I don't remember what came up, but something came up that he had to attend to. But you know, he's doing very well. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, like, he had very unique takes on Cyprus and on things in Cyprus and that sort of thing because of, well, I mean, being a PhD, but also like, you know, having lived abroad and this sort of thing in various contexts. But yeah, he actually took me on the kind of long journey, you know, like to Stavrovouni and then down to Paphos and that kind of stuff. And I said to him, I was like, you know, aren't I putting you out? And he's like, no, I love to drive, you know. Like when like my wife and I got married, we had to live apart for a little while, and like something like this. And I had to drive from Michigan to Pennsylvania, and it was great. And I was like, okay, you know. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, how many in the seminary?
What's that?
How many were in the seminary that you last stayed with? How many seminarians?
I didn't visit a seminary.
Sorry, monastery.
Monastery. Oh, monastery. Well, it depends. I mean, I'd say Makaras had somewhere in the mid-30s. St. Heraclius had somewhere in the 30s of nuns, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how many Stavrovouni had. Gikos has 40 on the books and 2 in attendance. I'm sorry, that's not literally the truth.
But only the one is a women's monastery,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. There were definitely smaller monasteries. One thing I kind of learned in Cyprus as well, it's something that I sort of had known before, but monasteries are kind of like hermit crab shells, you know, like where they can be, right? It's like, oh darn, the monastic community at such and such a place died out. But 30 years later, other people show up and are like, "Hey, Bishop, can we have this compound, right?" And that actually is exactly what happened at St. Heraclius. It used to be a men's monastery, and I think it died out in like roughly the 1970s, and but has been beautifully resurrected as a women's monastery in the modern time. So.
One quick one. Was the Russian church that you showed actually under the Moscow Patriarch, or was it under a local bishop?
In this case, well, the rich guy built 2 things. First, he built the Russian church, and it's huge. I mean, you could have a gathering with 40 or 50,000 people there.
Oh.
Right? And not just the building itself, but then like the area around. And there's like a bandstand and like all kinds of things, and a little bit of like interesting nationalism stuff. Like they got like this statue of Constantine Palaiologos, the last emperor of Byzantium, holding a sword, you know, and all this kind of stuff. So, but the interesting thing then with that is he also built what can only be described as a bishop's palace on the other end of the campus, whatever, for one of the Cypriot bishops. So the bishop lives on the grounds of the Russian church, actually.
What's his goal?
What's the rich Russian guy? I have no idea. I will say that definitely people were ambivalent to the presence of the Russians. Like, I mean, to some degree, it's like, so there are a lot of Russians and a lot of Israelis in Cyprus now. And, you know, actually they may be there to some degree for similar reasons. You know, part of them being like, we're wealthy people and we want to defend ourselves. And part of defending ourselves is like, when Netanyahu starts a war, I move back to Cyprus, right? Or, you know, I don't want my son drafted into Vladimir Putin's war. I'm going to go hang out in Cyprus into perpetuity, right? Where was I with that? So a little bit of ambivalence. Like, I think to some degree, I mean, you have Cypriots who are like, you know, Russian people are Orthodox. It's, you know, it's great for them to be here. And then definitely there was like, some of them are involved in like mob activities and stuff like this, you know, and they're they've got a lot of money, but they're maybe not the kind of Russians we want on the island, that kind of thing. Right, so. Any other questions for me? Okay, well, that'll conclude us for tonight, and I will I'll invite you up here. As I said, you know, please come up. You can anoint yourself with the oil from Apostle Andrew, and I guess we'll pour out these comandarias, and you may partake of it if you wish to. So, you're very welcome. You're very welcome.